I can identify with that, or like I'm not alone. And so I think that's kind of my biggest goal, is to just reach as many people as I can and like make people feel like you're not alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, I even found you on social media. So like you came up on my For You page and I was like, "Oh, hey." And then I like started like getting really nosy because I try to find people who I think are very influential and people who I think are going to be great role models, as I'm very picky about who I put on the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's like to me, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stalk this person for a little bit. See how they're doing. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna add them, and then I'm gonna harass them, and then no, and that's normally how it goes. And I really love that. And I love that you told me that you're a trans athlete because there's a lot of misconceptions about transgender people and athletics. I don't know what it is. It's like they think like I had to explain to a friend at one point. I was like, look, now that I'm on testosterone, my muscle mass is going to be more as a cis male. I was like, you got to understand that my muscle mass is changing. Like I've already gained more weight. I've already widened out. Um, I don't know. Apparently, I have a butt now. My legs have gotten bigger. I know like things have never happened. But like apparently, I'm the first male in my family with a booty. I'm excited for that.
I love that.
I have my grandfather's calves now. Like I've actually gotten physically healthier having more testosterone in my body for me because my body just needed it, like I knew it needed it. And when I explained this to her, and I hope I explained it correctly. So let me know if I don't, but if I didn't, I said when a trans woman starts therapy, hormone therapy, not only are they on testosterone blocker, but they're on estrogen pills, which means their body feminizes. So that way the muscle mass doesn't become as a regular man and it becomes more of as a woman would be. So therefore, if she's in the sport, she's actually on the equal playing field as other women. Did I do that?
Yeah, I mean, from just like an anecdotal like
Yeah.
perspective, like that's been a struggle too. Like as an athlete, I've always been super competitive, and like learning my limitations now, like learning that like I don't have as much muscle mass, like my endurance is down, my strength is down, like there's a noticeable difference. And that was a huge struggle for me physically and mentally, is like learning that like I can't do the things that I used to. I'm not as athletic as I used to. And like at the same token, like I love that. Like I love that my body's changing, but like I can't play volleyball or tennis or run as fast. Like I'm not, as a high level athlete as I was before. Like, my fat has redistributed. I've gained more fat. I've lost muscle. And so I think that, yeah, that is kind of a misconception of this athletic edge. And people are always like, well, you'll always be taller and you'll have like, more bone density. And I'm like, there's so many different things that make up an athlete, right? Like, like just being able to like, I've had to like get used to my new body. Like the way I move is different. Like the way I jump is different. Just the way my body reacts is different. And there's so many different things that go into being an athlete. And so like it's easy to say that, I'm keeping my height and I'm keeping my bone density or my lung capacity, but I'm losing so many different other things. And it's honestly like I'm honestly having to relearn how to play volleyball and how to play tennis because my body's completely different even in just the first year. And I know that my body's going to continue to change. And
Yeah.
so I think that people are so quick to, people do research, but the fact of the matter is that if you're, no matter what you're doing research on, you're going to find, you're going to find what you want to find. You're not
Yeah.
going to, you're going to find, the statistics of what is going to back up your opinion as opposed to, taking yourself out of it. And we're also talking about such a minute population, like trans people, make up for it's like 1 to 3% of the population. And then how many of those trans people are athletes? So like there's this argument of like, why don't trans athletes just have their own, like their own, whatever, their own competition? I'm like, there'd be like three of us. Like there's no, it's like,
Yeah,
you're just,
yeah, there would not be many.
it's so exclusionary. And just the whole like gender testing, and you're seeing like, especially in track and field, like African athletes like Caster Semenya and like the Namibian like sprinters, like they're under such scrutiny, and so there is like racism combined with transphobia in this like gender testing, testosterone testing. And if you actually look at athletes, like elite female athletes who are cisgender, are going to have more testosterone than I do as a trans woman, just because that's how your body works. When you're an elite athlete and you have that much muscle mass, your body changes. And so because of my hormone levels, like my testosterone levels are lower than that of like elite cis female athletes. And so it's something that people don't necessarily understand or like give the chance to understand. And I mean, we're not out here breaking records. There's a female weightlifter trans weightlifter that was in the Tokyo Olympics. Her last name was Gabby. Gabbard. I don't remember. Anyway, but she's a weightlifter from New Zealand, and she qualified for the Olympics as a trans female, and she didn't even complete a single lift. Like, so this misconception of like trans athletes taking over sports, like breaking records. There's not a single world record that's held by a trans woman. So it's just this war on trans women, and just like using it to weaponize, this agenda against, or for homophobia and transphobia is just like terrifying. Yeah, being a trans athlete, like, it's scary enough being a trans person in the world, but like, and then you throw athletics in, which is already such a hyper scrutinized like world. It can be really, really scary. So that's why I try to be as, out and proud as I can as a trans athlete. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because I was talking to a chaplain who is in a relationship with a trans man, and she said to me, "Tell me in the Bible where you can find," and it says anything about transgender people. They don't exist in the Bible. So why should there be hate if we're not even
right? And it's like, and the Bible is like, it's such I was actually raised Mormon.
Okay.
So I was raised Mormon until I was like 16. Okay. Yeah. And so it is so just
props
like,
to your dad then. I'm like,
right?
Props to your dad. That's a hard religion. That's wow. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's like there's so many different interpretations of the Bible and so many different translations of it. And like, I can see the beauty, and like, I'm never going to knock someone else's beliefs. Like, I think that, everyone's beliefs, religion, whatever is like great. Like, whatever works for you works for you. Exactly. But it's like, there's so many different interpretations and different translations. It's like, it's so hard to like have that be just like the end all be all, to judge people and to evaluate, and it's also like not 4,000 years ago. So it's just like things change. And, so religion's definitely something that kind of impacted my life growing up, but it's interesting.
Honestly, that's actually now a question I didn't even think about, is like being raised Mormon, kind of how we had to have a little bit of an impact on, becoming who you are and having to come out to your family. How was that for you?
It was terrifying. Like, honestly, like I actually was talking to my sister last night about it. I was like, I remember thinking that like my lifestyle choice, whatever that means, that's what we're told as, young kids, wasn't possible. And it was that representation. It was like, when I was, growing up, in the early 2000s, like there was barely any queer representation, let alone trans representation. So it was like, it wasn't possible. Like it wasn't possible to live a successful life or be happy as a queer person, as a trans person. And I think that's why I didn't come out for so long. I came out pretty young as queer and gay. I came out in high school, but that was like, even that was so revolutionary for my family, like let alone coming out as trans. And so it took a lot of unpacking of that. And it was like a lot of, I just remember at a very, very young age having these like deep discussions of gender and sexuality that I didn't really comprehend because I had no resources for it, right? I had no one that looked like me on TV or who I thought, I could identify with. And so it was really scary because it's like you're told that, you have to be, cis, you have to be straight in order to live a successful life, in order to go to heaven, in order to be successful. And so and that's ingrained in you from such a young age. And being able to unpack that and live past that. I look back at coming out, and I've come out 5,000 different times, coming out with all my sexualities and my genders. And I look back and I honestly don't know how I did it. Like, I think it's such a brave act to do, to come out. And it's such a I think it's the biggest, act of, of self-love and of
and vulnerability.
It's just such a beautiful thing. Yeah. And it's like an act of, it's such a beautiful thing. And it's such it shows so much strength. And it's an act of protest. It's an act of protest against, cis heteronormative society. I think that as queer people, just being out and proud, or even if not being out, just being alive as a queer or trans person is an act of protest against, oppression. I think that, there are some people who love to, march and who love to be online fighting people. Everyone has their own ministry, as I like to say. Everyone has their own lane that they like to, be an activist. I think that coming out and being, especially as a former religious kid, is such a beautiful act of protest and act of self-love.
I completely agree. I was raised Catholic. So I was lucky because I went to things like All Souls Catholic Church, where they actually truly believed in love with no matter who you were, whether you were gay, trans, bi, or anything. But I did not. I mean, I grew up the same time you did. I
Mm-hmm.
had no representation. I didn't even meet a transgender person. The first transgender person I met was a trans woman, and I'm still friends with her to this day. She's actually on my podcast. I absolutely love her, and she's still religious. She preaches, that God loves you no matter what, and I absolutely love that. She's an amazing human being, and I just remember being like, wow, you took ownership of how you felt. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I met my first transgender male a couple months later, and I used to work with him. His name was Sam. And I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, going, well, so I was like 19. I was like, I think this makes more sense. And her reaction was horrible. So in recloset Drew for a longest time. And I think though, if I like how we talked to you, is like I don't think I would have been ready for that. I don't think I would have been ready for like the second time to come out again. I think I needed to take my time and work on my mental health first, and that's what I did.
For sure.
Well, I did that as I learned to work past a lot of the traumas and abuses that I went through as a child, and kind of understand where I'm at now, and kind of being like, okay, I want to show people that people like me can exist. Like I want to show, because there's a national average that transgender people make less than $15,000 a year. Did you know that? You know how devastating that is? I am like that one person that's like, well, I make way more than that, and I worked for it. Because if we can change our outside to match our inside, then why can't we change what's in our mind? Why can't we change that story that the heteronormative community gave us of we don't deserve happy life, kids, marriage, great job? Why can't we change that and prove otherwise? And I think that's what I see like in you, and I see in a lot of people that I do interviews, that we're changing the dynamic. We're showing like, hey, here is this wonderful non-binary trans woman in front of me, and somebody can look at you who's maybe 12 years old and is like, oh my God, that's me. And they can
Right.
resonate with you. That to me is the most powerful experience that you can possibly give.
Absolutely. It's just changing that narrative of trauma. Like our existence is always associated with violence, which is valid because we don't have such a high rate of violence against trans people. But there is more. There is more to our community. There is more to us than just the violence that's committed against us. There is there's trans people who are educated, who are successful. Not that you have to be make a lot of money or be educated to be successful, but that is an option for you. Like there isn't. It's not just you're doomed to live in poverty and be on the outskirts of society. Like we're here, we're all around us, and there are people who who are like us at every facet of life. And I think that that's so important to show kids and to show everyone of all ages that that we're here, and that it's not just sadness and trauma, and like that we experience love, we experience family, we experience success in school and in our professional life. And I think that changing that narrative, and that's why I love shows like Pose. I love shows like that portray, because it's so important to know our history of as queer trans people, of what it was to struggle in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and just like what it was like the people who paved the way for us.
And
But it's
people
also, I think, and I think it's so important now to to showcase where we're headed and where we want to go, and that we want to be more than just a sad story, and we want to show more of our dynamic as members of society that contribute, and that are successful in our lives personally and emotionally.
Exactly. And I know that you have found love, which is a beautiful thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I met my boyfriend earlier this year. I actually was dating someone else my first transition. That didn't work out for a plethora of reasons. But we won't focus on that. My boyfriend is also trans. He's a trans masculine person who has been out for 6, 7 years. And so